Today, we have another 5 terrifying ghost stories that get progressively scarier. Watch until the end to hear what terrified a young girl whenever she looked into the reflection of her television. If you enjoy these stories, then please tap the like button and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. I'm your host, Severed Soul. Story 1. There's a ghost in our house. By Reddit user Active Arachnid 4797. Okay, so I'm a 15-year-old female. Me and my twin sister, Sophia, were in our beds in our own rooms on the night this happened. I was trying to get to sleep when I could hear heavy footsteps from outside my bedroom door. I texted Sophia to ask her what the hell she was doing. I presumed it was her, because it was only me and her in the house that night, as our parents were out. She replied with, "I'm in bed, dumbass." I called her a liar, so she sent me a picture of herself in bed. Footsteps started moving in circles around the house for around another 20 minutes or so. I decided to try to ignore it and rationalise it in my head as much as possible. But deep down, I was absolutely petrified. About 30 minutes later, Sophia sent me a text saying that she'd heard a light switch turn on and off about 3 times. I told her that maybe it was a good idea if she came and slept in my room, as I was getting genuinely freaked out. She told me she was too scared to move. So, I got up and ran to her room as fast as I could, slamming the door behind me and turning on the light. When I climbed into her bed, things just seemed to get weirder. After about 10 minutes of being in her room, the footsteps started again. Exactly the same route as before. They started in the kitchen, down into the living room, then back around to the hallway that led to our bedrooms. And then it would repeat over and over again. We kept hearing light switches clicking on and off all around the house. The heating kept kicking on and off as if somebody was messing with the thermostat. It's normally very warm in my sister's bedroom because she has 2 heat vents in there. But it had gone freezing in there now, and every once in a while we would feel a breeze. Bear in mind, no windows or doors were open in that house anywhere. We started to hear tapping on her bathroom door and on the walls, and it sounded very much like somebody kept opening and closing the door to the cleaning closet next to the kitchen. We were both absolutely frozen with fear, too scared to move. Neither of us really had any knowledge of the paranormal, and we'd never experienced anything like this before. Once the noises eventually stopped, we decided to get up and search the whole house together. We didn't find anything out of place. All the windows and doors were still locked shut, meaning nobody entered or exited that house. Again, we have no experience with this kind of stuff, so any advice would be very much appreciated. Story 2. The Haunted Elevator by Reddit user Kim Shane. Okay, so I just finished a 6:30 PM exam held at the upper wing of our school building. The upper wing has the classrooms. The lower wing holds the lobby and has an elevator to the left and a staircase to the far right. Since the building has glass walls and has Christmas lights strewn all over the glass facade encasing the lower wing, maintenance has the lower wing at lights out after 6 PM, purely for aesthetic purposes. The outdoor Christmas lights really pop this way. Anyway, so I just finished my exam, which was held in room 402. I was one of the very first students to finish the exam and leave the room. When I exited the exam room, I was alone in making my way to the lower wing where the lobby is at. I was ready to descend the staircase. That's when the elevator right behind me just opened. I looked over, and it was so brightly lit that it illuminated the whole dark lobby. But nobody was at the lobby except for me, and nobody was inside the open elevator at all. I noticed that the call button was lit too, and it indicated that it was going down. So I thought to myself, maybe somebody exited really fast and accidentally pressed a button or two before leaving. I found it weird, but paid it no mind. I continued descending to the third floor via the staircase, and then, right when I landed at the third floor lobby, the elevator opened again. It cast an unusually bright light from the other end of the floor. I looked over again, and I saw that once more nobody was inside the elevator, and nobody was at the lobby at all. Once again, the call button was lit as if it had been pressed, and it indicated that it was still going down. I was getting nervous at this point, and I just couldn't bear to look into that elevator for too long. So, keeping my eyes on my shoes, I hurried down the staircase to the second floor. That's when it happened, for a third time. The elevator doors opened right when I reached that second floor. It cast its light on the whole lobby, and once again showed that nobody was inside the elevator. Nobody was there, and nobody was at the lobby, meaning that nobody could have pressed that call button, and yet it was still going down. No one was there, and yet I had an unwavering feeling that somebody was glaring at me from inside that elevator. I raced as quickly as I could down to the ground floor. This time, I was too fast for the elevator. The ground floor, which was empty, was also at lights out. But the main doors leading outside allowed some light and some noise in. I ran out of the building as fast as I could, and I only got to relax a couple of paces outside the building. Just then, a classmate called out to me from the benches just outside the building, and I felt an instant sense of relief. Now that I'm finished writing this, I just remembered that during our midterm exams, one of the proctors for an evening exam had told us that he once saw the ghost of a young boy inside room 401. Room 401 just happens to be right next door to the room in which I took my exams. It became a bit of a dumb rumour for a while, but nobody really cared. Story 3. Apparition in a Thunderstorm. By Reddit user Specific Narwhal. The house that I grew up in, the same house that my parents and one of my brothers still live in to this day, is very active with benevolent spirits. For some quick context, I grew up sharing a house with 2 female spirits. I felt their energy, had encounters, and still notice them lingering around when I go to visit my parents still to this day. One of the most intense encounters, however, happened back in 2007. I was 13, my brother was 12, and the twins were 7. It was a humid day, with thunderstorm warnings and dark skies. I remember it being late summer, and the whole week before this was thunderstorm after thunderstorm. The storms knocked the power out, leaving the house dimly lit by candlelight. My parents were in the garage, trying to get the generator to start, so that my mother could at least have a cup of tea by boiling water from the kettle. Us kids, of course, wanted to be able to charge our Nintendo DS's. Since that was our obsession, like many kids growing up in the mid-2000s. I was sitting in the basement with my brothers. We were all sitting, waiting for the power to come back on. Our DSs were completely drained of power, and we were wondering what to do. My brother Chad mentioned that he wanted to go upstairs to grab something from the bedroom, but he was too afraid to go alone. I remember saying something along the lines of, "I'm sorry, are you not able to go up there by yourself?" Chad stared at me intensely. He said, "I could, but I want you to come." I knew he was afraid of the dark, so I didn't bother to question him anymore. So, together, we climbed the stairs from the basement. We walked through the tiled hallway that connects to the kitchen, and then turned left to face the stairs that lead up to the second floor. It was only 10 steps or so it wasn't a very steep or strenuous climb to take. There was just pitch black in front of us. A deep, foreboding feeling was running through me. I've always felt very much in tune with my intuitions and tried my best to listen to them. But things happened so suddenly before I had chance to react. With our flashlights still pointing up the stairs, lightning flashed and illuminated the hallway. If you were standing where me and my brother were standing, you would have seen a hallway at the top of the stairs. This hallway only went on for about 12 feet or so before you came to the door of a linen closet. Standing right in front of that linen closet at the end of the hallway was a woman. The brightness of the lighting almost hurt my eyes, yet I could still make out the figure of this woman standing in the hallway. She was wearing a long skirt and a button-up shirt. I couldn't place an exact time period to the clothes, and I still can't to this day, but I do know it was years, if not decades, prior to 2007. The lady wasn't facing us. She was staring off to the left of the hallway towards my brother's bedroom. I can remember this intense feeling of fear. I think this was more because we definitely weren't expecting to see the apparition of a woman standing before us. It wasn't necessarily because I felt like she was evil. After what felt like about a minute, me and Chad bolted into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. We both sat there wide-eyed, just staring into space, trying our best to come to terms with what we'd just seen. Luckily, nothing paranormal or strange happened for the rest of that evening. Eventually, we went back downstairs to the basement, and our parents managed to get the generator working once more. We played on our video games and tried our best to forget what we saw. But I remember wondering who that apparition was. I'd had previous encounters with the spirit of a girl I named Tara. But this couldn't be Tara. Tara was much younger. From then on, I realised Tara wasn't the only spirit in our home. This woman would make more appearances in the future, but she never gave me any impression that she meant us any harm. Story 4. My friend lived with a ghost girl. By Reddit user, This is Gargamel. This story was experienced and told to me by a friend. He said it happened not long after the 9/11 tragedy. It was approximately a year after, and I've never forgotten what he told me. So, my friend had moved to New York City to find a job and somewhere to live. We found an apartment in a beautiful brick building that was owned by a woman who lived not far away in the Brooklyn area. She was looking to rent the place out. She was very sweet, and she said that she hadn't been ready to rent the place out for some time. But she felt that now the time was right, and after meeting my friend, she said that she thought he was a great fit for the apartment. He had a friend local to the area who also needed somewhere to live, so he decided to move in with him. It was a great arrangement, since this friend was gone almost 90% of the time. He travelled a lot for work, which meant that he was usually gone for long periods of time. He let his friend have the bedroom, and he slept on the futon. It was never confirmed at the time, but my friend believed that his friend was single. For this reason, he felt there was very little to worry about in terms of other people being in the apartment. When he first moved in, he noticed that the lady had left a nice scarf hanging up on the wall and a basket with some shoes in the closet. One morning, my friend was awoken from a deep sleep. He heard the front door unlock, open, close, and then lock again. Then, whoever had just entered the apartment went into his roommate's room and shut the door. This seemed to happen quite frequently. Somebody would come home late at night, go into his roommate's room and shut the door. These just seemed like normal occurrences, things you'd expect when living with someone else. They had opposing sleep schedules, so my friend didn't really pay that much attention to it. For this very reason, for a while, he just assumed that it was his roommate. He would hear the shower turn on, doors open and close, pots and pans clattering in the kitchen, things like that. He thought he was a great roommate. He always seemed to clean up after himself and put the pots and pans back where they belong. It didn't really look like anyone else had ever even been in the kitchen. He was watching TV one day when he actually caught sight of a young woman pass through the apartment. He just assumed that this girl was his roommate's girlfriend. He said she was young and pretty and looked around the same age as his roommate. She hung up her scarf in the hallway and made her way into the bedroom. He said she never seemed to speak. She just smiled and made herself scarce. He said whenever his roommate was back home in between jobs, it came to my friend's attention that his roommate was actually really untidy and quite lazy. He didn't clean up after himself, and he left his belongings everywhere. Eventually, after confronting him on this, my friend said to him, "Your girlfriend seems to do a pretty good job of cleaning up after you all the time." His roommate responded, "What are you talking about? I don't have a girlfriend." My friend said, "Well, some girl keeps coming in, she must have your key. She's been sleeping in your room and showering here." His roommate didn't know what on earth he was talking about. So, just to be safe, they agreed to change the locks and get some new keys. However, after just a few weeks, the young girl was back again, showering and cooking, or at least making the sounds as if somebody was in the kitchen. The scarf on the hanger in the hallway would occasionally disappear and then appear again. Clearly, this girl, whoever she was, wasn't getting the picture. The landlady called my friend to ask how everything was going. She said if he needed anything for the place, just to give her a call. Being his landlady and all, he just assumed she was being really nice. He felt lucky to have the place, and didn't want to complain to her about something like this. After a while, both roommates spoke again, and figured they didn't know who this girl was or how she was getting into the apartment. She seemed nice, but neither one of them knew her. They had tried their best to make the place secure, but nothing seemed to work. Soon after this, his roommate would have to leave for about a month again, so my friend would be in the apartment alone. My friend decided to call the landlady to ask her what they could do about their female intruder. When he described the young girl he was seeing in the apartment, the landlady seemed visibly shaken and upset. What she told him chilled him to his core. The landlady explained that originally the apartment had belonged to her daughter, but she had been killed in an accident. She explained that her daughter had lived in that apartment alone, and the scarf in the hallway and the shoes in the closet all belonged to her. She said that when she was cleaning out the apartment, she couldn't find that scarf or the basket of shoes anywhere. She just presumed that she'd already gotten everything out. My friend moved out soon after and decided not to renew the lease on the apartment. He told his roommate later about what the landlady had told him. He also decided to move his things out of that apartment and find somewhere else to live. The landlady believed that her daughter was still present in that apartment because she loved it so much when she was alive. She believed that she was coming and going and taking her favourite scarf with her when she left. The girl in the reflection of the TV. By Reddit user WitchAd3205. I just recently moved out of a house that I'd lived at for about 6 years. My family and I moved into that house when I was about 13 years old. We moved in with a family friend whose parents had passed away just a few years beforehand. Not much really happened there, other than the usual, seeing things out of the corner of your eyes and things like that. Nothing too scary or memorable. The way the house was laid out, from the living room, you were able to see down the hallway through a galley kitchen, right through to the back door where a half bath was, and the washer and dryer hookups. Occasionally, when I'd glance up at the black TV screen in the living room, I'd see something absolutely terrifying. I would notice what appeared to be the figure of a woman standing in the middle of that hallway. It was just the outline of a woman standing there still, and what looked to be long black hair falling down past her shoulders. She appeared mostly black, like a shadow, so you couldn't really make out any facial features or anything. At first, I would find myself just staring at that shadow in the reflection of the TV. Then I would turn to look down into the hallway to see nobody there. But every time I would turn to look back into the TV screen, there she would be. Countless times I would search that area to find something to rationalise what I was seeing, but I never found anything. Maybe coats or clothes, or maybe just the way a certain shadow had been casted. But nothing. I would look back up and she'd still be there. After some time, I'd become somewhat desensitised to it. She never moved, and she never made any noise. She just stood there, still. Knowing there was no danger, and that she meant no harm, I simply just ignored her any time I saw her standing there. None of my family members ever mentioned seeing anything. Once we had all moved out, I presumed that it must have just been my mind playing tricks on me way back then. I started dating my now boyfriend a few months before we moved out. He had visited our previous house a few times and stayed there once in a while. Today, me and him were sharing some of our ghost stories from our childhood, and I started to talk to him about some of the things I saw in that house. But before I even began telling him what I'd seen in that TV screen, he cut me off. He started to get really freaked out. He said that one night he'd got up to go and get his soda from the kitchen to bring back to my room. He said that once he'd grabbed his soda, immediately he felt like he was being watched. He described to me exactly what he saw when he looked into the reflection of that TV. I started trembling and became very emotional, realising that it wasn't only me that had seen her. He described the exact same thing that I had seen. But he said he was much closer to her than I ever was. He said when he looked into that reflection, she was standing right behind him, right over his shoulder. And yet even he couldn't make out any distinguishing features, just that long black hair. He had only seen her one time, but it was still terrifying for me to realise that I wasn't the only one to see her. I called my dad to ask him if he'd ever seen her, and he said no. He said that occasionally he'd see someone walking around our house, but he never saw anything in the reflection of that TV. As of right now, as far as I'm aware, we're the only two people that ever saw her, which makes this encounter even more peculiar to me. I have no explanation to this day. I really wonder why she was there. If you have enjoyed today's stories, please tap the like button and subscribe to this channel for a feast of grim and grisly content. Please also leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.